Awesome. We have Jonathan Goodman on board to today's podcast. He is the creator of the Personal Training Development Center, as well as many other fitness businesses. And he has an upcoming book launch for The Obvious Choice. And we can definitely get into the nitty gritty of everything later on. But yeah, it's great to have you on, man.
Hey, I've listened to a bunch of episodes of this podcast. Like I said to you, I think on Twitter, it owned a place into my rotation. So you're doing a great job with it, and I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it as well. And we can go down to back to your childhood and start when you're 15 years old in Toronto when you discovered the YMCA. Could you just kind of
Oh
describe
yeah.
how that led up to that experience and kind of how that changed your trajectory of life into discovering the world of fitness?
Yeah, man. I'm a small guy, right? I'm 5'4", so I was always a small kid. And I played sports. I loved playing sports. I was the kid who'd be shooting a ball into a hockey net 3 hours, 4 hours a day.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I was skilled enough that I could still compete, for example, in ice hockey. But then I remember I was at George Bell Arena at in Toronto, and we played against this other team. And I remember I was facing off against this kid, and I looked up, and I saw he had this little hair above his lip. And I
Mhm.
looked over at the other kids, and I noticed they all had mustaches. And I think that was the moment where I thought, I am screwed. The kids just started getting big. And I
Yeah.
was fast enough and skilled enough that they only caught up with me once every 2 or 3 games. But when they did, I was on my ass. And my
Mhm.
dad had been going to the gym to the health center at the YMCA at that point for a while. And so I asked him if I could go with him. And very quickly, I realized that I actually was more interested in weightlifting than I was sports, which makes sense because even in sports, like
Mm.
I was a scorer, I was a hitter in baseball. I didn't, as bad as this is to say, I cared much more about the name on the back of my jersey than the front. I wanted to score the goal. I didn't really care if our team won
Yeah.
the game. And so weightlifting is kind of that. It's very much a solo endeavor where you're
Mhm.
there for the betterment of yourself, competing against oneself. And I think that aspect of it now in retrospect is really what hooked me and kept me going. And then, in high school I was the guy working out and the other guys weren't, so that was cool.
Yeah, it's cool because like we have such a plethora of like different sports out there, and for solo sports like maybe weightlifting, and I'm a runner myself, it's like you're not
Mhm.
really competing with anyone but yourself, and it's such a great outlets for personal growth and just continuing to better oneself. So it's cool to see how you got into that journey yourself. And on the topic of fitness, because I feel like there's so much advice nowadays thrown out there
Yeah.
in the internet about fitness, and I'm sure you come across good advice and also bad advice.
I
And my
mean, and,
question
and the
is,
funniest thing is it's the
yeah,
same shit. Like I've been in this industry since
uh-huh,
2005 now. I've had a website online in the fitness industry since 2011. It's the same things.
mm.
Like we're talking about the same things as we've always talked about. They just get more and more sensationalized over time as the media evolves. Anyway, what were you gonna ask?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what were some of like several things that you've come across that are kind of the most misunderstood concepts or practices around fitness? Because
When it comes to fitness,
yeah,
I mean, you got to change it up all the time. Nothing wrong with changing it up, nothing wrong with doing
mm,
different stuff. But if you want to get stronger, if you want to put on muscle, progressive
yeah,
overload is the way to do it. It's always been the way to do it. You basically repeat the same core, call it 6 to 10 exercises or movements, and you just progressively make them harder, pushing outside of your comfort zone and improving your strength over time strategically. When it comes to nutrition, there's tons. I mean, nutrition is
mm,
not complicated at all. If you're trying to put on weight, eat more calories than you expend. If you're trying to lose weight, eat fewer calories than you expend. Generally, high quality carbs should be eaten in and around workouts. Fats are fine to eat. Protein is great to eat. Eat your veggies. Have a little bit of fiber as you start to get older. There ain't that much, like, if you do that,
mm,
you're gonna do pretty good.
yeah,
Um, Supplements are supplemental. I've actually stopped all supplements. I don't take any supplements anymore. They're very much supplemental, and they really do much less than people think. They don't also band-aid any other kind of stuff that you should be doing or eating. I mean, It's not complicated, but humans have a tendency to overcomplicate things, especially intelligent humans. So
Mm.
we do that with fitness the same as we do that with business, the same as we do that with anything else.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because like I think definitely we really make fitness much more complex than it actually is. And if we really
Mm,
dial into like the basic practices, it's like yeah, you just dial in these principles and you can actually be a really fit person, just healthy.
yeah.
And
It's the
and
difference between trying to get, be the person on stage versus
yeah.
trying to live as a happy, active, good-looking, fit adult.
Mhm.
There's a significant difference for sure.
Yeah, and it also seems like, the modern life, we've kind of like decided that fitness is something that's more optional instead of something that being something that's really foundational to our lives.
Yeah.
It's almost like, when we say we go to the gym, that's like something that's like outside of like our day-to-day activities.
Right.
So what is like kind of your pitch or your case that fitness should be this rudimentary foundational part of our lives?
I mean, I'm 39 years old. Something happened in and around year 35
Mm,
where I started to really notice the divide between people
mm,
that I knew that call it take care of themselves. Like, I don't care how you exercise, right? I don't care if you ride your
yeah.
bike. I don't care if you pump weights. I don't care if you do CrossFit. I don't care if you do Zumba. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Just move your body.
Hmm.
And I started to notice the divide around 35 years old, where the people who took care of themselves were maintaining their youth and their energy
Mm,
and their mental capacity. And the people who didn't were seemingly rapidly accelerating in the opposite direction.
mm,
And as the 4 years have gone on since then, like I said, I just turned 39. I've noticed that divide starts to, those two lines between people who are active and people who aren't active just gets wider and wider and wider. And at any one point in time, you can always jump the line from inactive to
yeah.
active. You
Uh-huh.
can always jump that line, no matter how far gone you are. I mean, my first ever client was a 67-year-old woman with arthritic fingers and two knee replacements who had never been in the gym before.
Hmm.
She started. She started with a broomstick. Within 2 years, she was deadlifting 95 pounds. You
Wow.
can do it no matter
Mm,
where you are, which I think is
mm,
beautiful. I think the fact that today could be the least fit you ever are for the rest of your life is actually quite poetic. But the longer you wait, the wider those lines are going to be from one another, the more difficult it's going to be to jump from one line to the other
mm,
line. The more you're going to have to overcome habitually, physically, potentially financially. You might need more assistance over the course of your journey. You will certainly have to have much bigger lifestyle changes, maybe new
mm.
friend bases, maybe new social activities. It's just harder. It's
Yeah.
just harder. But you will find that, I mean, days I exercise, I don't know about you, man. Days I exercise are better days than days when I don't exercise.
Hmm.
I think better. I have more energy. I'm able to show up more for my kids. I just find that I'm able to be more present with them. Like it's weird. Like I'm able to sit on the floor and play Legos with them and be more with them and think less about all of this irrelevant, unimportant shit that for whatever reason my dumb human brain thinks is really important
Hmm.
right now, but I'll forget about it tomorrow. And I don't like that about myself. And I find that days that I exercise, I'm able to be more of the type of person that I like.
Mm. I think it's like cool. It's like, yeah, it takes a lot of work to actually, work out and actually consistently exercise, but the cost of like not exercising is much greater than just going after it and putting in that work.
Right.
And yeah, it's crazy because I think going back on what you said previously on how like the divide between people who exercise and people who don't. I think when we're first starting out, maybe like I'm like I'm 19 years old, so like we don't really see
Yeah.
much of a difference between
No.
those who exercise and those who don't.
And
But
you
it's
got
like
so much testosterone sifting through your body, bud. You could touch a weight. You don't even need to lift it and you'll get muscles.
yeah, so it's like, right now it's like the time to put in the work because like later on it's like
Yes,
compound interest, the whole thing with also with investing as well. It's like if you
it
put
is.
in the work now, the results will show
Yeah.
inevitably later down in the future. And I guess my next question for you is like, for someone who's kind of struggling to build that fitness habit, it's like, what is that one thing like from you working with your clients that you've noticed to really get that person to really zone in on that consistency in that fitness?
Yeah, so this is it's a good question, and I'm going to give an answer that might seem different from what you would often hear.
Mm, love that.
And my answer is it really doesn't matter what you do.
Hmm.
It really doesn't matter the intensity with which you do it. It doesn't matter if it's the best exercise. It doesn't matter if it's not even a very efficient type of exercise for your goals. The single important thing that you need to do is make it convenient. You make it convenient first. Pick whatever is closest to where you live or where you work at times when it is most convenient for you. Nail
Mm,
that. Because what starts to happen is that once we build a habit and begin to self identify as the type of person who exercises, then we start to carve out the time and build more of the routine.
mm,
And that's when you can begin to optimize if you want to optimize.
mm.
But it has to start with it being convenient. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
During the summer, the last like 2 years or so, I trained CrossFit. And it's interesting because the first like 20 years that I worked and was actively involved in fitness, I never trained CrossFit. I just, I was doing my thing. Nothing against it. I just didn't do it. But the last 2 years or so, I got into CrossFit, and it's been fun. But I was going to a box here in Toronto, and the classes are at 7:30 and then 9 o'clock.
Mm,
And oftentimes the classes would be full because they can only have 10 people. It's a small box.
mhm.
And so that was great in the summer. I'd get there. Sorry, the times are at 7 a.m. and 9 o'clock. So there's no 8 a.m. class.
Gotcha,
And
gotcha.
oftentimes the classes get full. And
Mhm,
that worked great for me in the summer. I'd go to the 7 a.m.s. It was nice to be up early in the morning. I'd get back in time to make my kids would be just about waking up. I make a breakfast. My wife is a night person. I'm a morning person. Works great. She
mhm,
sleeps in. I get back. I make breakfast, right? Works awesome. But then school started. And drop off for my son's school is 9:15 a.m. And so if I were to do a 7 a.m. class, a 4 hour class, the CrossFit box is a 15-minute drive away. I
mhm,
wouldn't have been home till about 8:30, which means that I would then miss most of the morning with my family. I wouldn't be able to make the breakfast. I wouldn't be able to have that morning with
mhm,
them. Okay, so I joined and the 9 a.m. just doesn't work because I wouldn't be able to drop off my kid at school, which I like to do every day.
yeah.
And so I joined an F45 that's right around the corner. The F45, the class is at 9:30. I drop off my kid at 9:15. I continue on. We ride our bikes to school. I continue on the bike and I'm at the F45 at 9:25. And I can wake up in the morning and write usually for a few hours, have breakfast, have morning with the kids, drop them off at school, get my workout in, and I'm at my desk at 10:30.
Mhm,
And it's not optimal. I think I probably like CrossFit more than F45.
yeah.
I would probably also like to work with a personal trainer more or work in a gym more. But for right now, for this point in my life, F45, the fast workouts, the in and out, the location of the studio, and the times of the classes mean that I'm going to do it 4 or 5 days a week.
Mm.
So make it convenient first. Figure that part out. And then you can decide whether you want to optimize it afterwards.
Yeah, I love that so much. It's like just make it convenient for you. So it's like much likely the likelihood of you doing it is like much greater.
Right.
And
And
I've
it's
heard,
and it's basic
yeah,
habit stacking. It's
yeah,
basic habit stacking, which
hmm,
is if you are already doing another behavior, can you tack it on to the back of another behavior or in front of another behavior as opposed to creating it as its own thing? I'm already dropping off my son at school on my bicycle.
hmm,
This is a continuation of something I'm already doing, not a new thing.
yeah.
And as a
I love,
result, it makes it
yeah,
much easier for me
hmm,
to do.
yeah. I love the stacking habits part. And I remember I came across another like fitness entrepreneur. He was saying how like whenever I move somewhere, I want to make sure the gym is like 15 minutes from my house, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. You don't want to make it convenient to do that activity because you know it's gonna be beneficial to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another, I kind of want to pivot a little bit. And you mentioned that in 2021, your wife got diagnosed with cancer and, you know, you were facing some challenges with your own business.
Mhm.
And you were mentioning how that kind of was kind of like a turning point in your life. You were saying how I got to live the quote unquote, if you could start
Yeah.
over knowing now what you know, what would you do? That
Yeah.
question. And how
Yeah.
did that experience really change you?
I don't wish cancer on anybody, of
Yeah.
course.
Hmm.
Even my worst enemies, I don't wish it on anybody. A cancer diagnosis, whenever it happens, my wife is now fine, right? But our neighbor two doors
Hmm.
down, one of our dearest friends, uh, it just got diagnosed with breast cancer. She had her first chemotherapy treatment last week.
Hmm.
Whenever it happens to somebody very close to me, or in my case, my wife,
Hmm.
this thing hits, which is like, yo, this is the kind of shit that's supposed to happen to other people. You intellectually know that it exists and that it's a thing,
Mm.
but it doesn't become real
Yeah.
until it happens.
Mhm.
And so, on one hand, I don't wish, of course, cancer on anybody. It's terrible in every sense of the word. But something like that happening, I say in the Obvious Choice book, I say, cancer has a habit of calling you out on your shit. It
Mm.
has a habit of making whatever isn't quite real in your life, or you haven't been paying attention to, or you know you should be doing, or you know things aren't quite right yet, but they're not quite bad enough, or hard
Mhm.
enough, or painful enough. It has a habit of breaking all that down and saying, let's reassess.
Right.
COVID-19 did that for a lot of people. There were a lot of people in every industry that were just doing okay, right? When
Hmm.
COVID-19 hit.
Right.
Like things weren't going well for them, but things weren't quite going badly for them either. And
Hmm.
actually, that's the worst state that you can be in as a human being, is doing just okay, is gliding through,
Mm.
because you're not forced to take any action. It's
Right.
actually better to have things go really, really poorly for you and experience that pain and fix your shit than it is for things to be going not quite well, but like
Hmm.
okay, but like you're not quite happy. What COVID-19 did is it forced people to fix, either go all in on the thing that they were only half in, or get out and try something new.
Yeah.
And it was really, really painful for a period of time. And a lot of people now have come out of it, the benefit of recent hindsight, saying things are way better for me as a result.
Mm.
Things are way better for me as a result. Not everybody, of course, but that's what Black Swan events do. They
Right.
are very much a part of our society. There's all of this stuff right now in the financial markets. The S&P 500 is performing the best it's ever performed, and there hasn't been a
Yep.
big
Hmm.
recession for a while. And the general sentiment is that this is a good thing, and I question it. And I'm questioning that from the standpoint of like, yo, I've benefited a lot from this.
Hmm.
Like I have a lot of money in the markets, and now I have a lot more money in the markets. And so I'm saying this from the standpoint of somebody who has really benefited from what's going on in the markets, and saying it's actually a really bad thing for society, what's happening in the markets. The newspapers, of course, and the websites are reporting, hey, the markets are performing so well, these valuations are great, whatever it is. But what it's also doing is it's making it basically impossible for your generation to have any sort of a reasonable entry point. What recessions do, what black swan events do, what cancer diagnoses do, is they reset a person, they reset a society
Mm.
to allow people a new entry point. And so when that happens, our business, my business, not our business, it was my business, still is my business. My business was doing pretty good for a lot of years. Like we basically were the only players teaching people how to build online training businesses. I wrote the
Got
literal
you.
textbook on it. We created the first ever certification on it. We owned the market
Hmm.
from 2013 to 2019. We owned the market. And we owned the market, and it was a small market. No big education players were interested in it because it was a small market, which was wonderful for us. We
Yeah.
were Switzerland. Nobody was paying any attention.
Yeah.
Right? And super profitable, all this good stuff, right? And then COVID-19 happened. And what happened, of course, is that everybody all of a sudden, basically overnight, like it's if you were to have asked me before COVID-19, if I were to like go in my crystal ball and say, what is the single best thing that could ever happen for my business? I might have said some weird, inexplicable event that nobody expects that forces every single personal trainer to work from home and work online. Like
Mm.
that might have been my answer.
Hmm.
Because you want to know what happened when the shutdowns happened in March of 2020? Whoosh, my business exploded, dude. Exploded. Exploded.
Hmm.
Because we were the only supply and demand artificially rose through the roof. And we
Yeah.
owned it.
Hmm.
Well, what did I do then? I started hiring. I was like, all right, we got it made. This is, I was Wayne Gretzky skating to where the puck is going. The puck is caught up. This is where we are. Not real. And so I started hiring in all these expensive staff members from all over the place, VP of product in this company, VP of marketing from that company, $200,000 a year here, $250,000 a year here, et cetera, et cetera, et
Hmm.
cetera. And then of course what happened was, well, supply started rising too. Everybody with 10,000 Instagram followers all of a sudden became an online business coach.
Right.
And so that was fine until gyms started to open back up. Now supply is going back down to its regular level. Demand is
Hmm.
still risen up. And all of a sudden I've taken on 2.5, $3 million more of expenses every year,
Yeah.
thinking that my life was made. At that same time was when Allison got diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
It's really hard psychologically because of the sunk cost,
Yeah.
but also as a business owner, especially a business owner in Ontario, which is one of the single places that is most employer friendly and small
Hmm.
business owner unfriendly that you could possibly do business in.
Mm.
It's really, really difficult to back out of employment agreements and extraordinarily expensive.
Mm.
I had to hire an employee legal firm. I had to pay, I mean, I had this guy who had been working with me for 5 months. I had to pay him 6 months severance. I mean, it's crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. And people in the United States, when I was telling them what was going on, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, this is business in Canada, man.
Yeah.
But it's really, really difficult to back up out of it. And that's why so many people get stuck when they own a business.
Mm.
And so I'm grateful that, in retrospect, now knowing, of course, that Allison's okay for her diagnosis, because it forced me to just be like, I got to get some room to breathe. And I don't care how painful this is going to be and things are not going well. Let's start over. Let's start over.
Yeah.
That's what we
And
did.
yeah. And right now, how has kind of your life changed
It's
compared to
amazing.
like before then?
It's amazing, man. It's so
Amazing.
good.
Hmm.
I switched the majority
Yeah.
of our compensation structures to be incentive based, profit based. I
Hmm.
stopped hiring on really experienced people who had worked for large organizations who basically only knew how to make project briefs and hire consultants. And I started saying to people, all right, I'm going to guarantee you, this base minimum, but instead, I'm going to pay you based off of an incentive structure. So if you perform the way that at a minimum you say that you're going to perform, then you're going to make the amount of money you want to make. And if you outperform that, you're going to make many times. And so what that does
Hmm.
is it self-selects for a certain type of person to work for the company,
Right.
and it self-selects out others. And so the people working for us almost across the board make 3 to 5 times what the averages are for other people working in those roles. And we need way fewer, because one of the things that I've learned about business over the years is that somebody who really outperforms in their role is worth 10 people.
Mm.
And so you can pay that person 5 times more.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah, it's
pay a
like,
great
yeah.
salesperson 5 times more than a just okay salesperson, and they're going to make you 10 times the money.
Yeah, because you also mentioned that you pay like some employees like way higher than the industry, and it's like one A plus player can equal like I don't
Huge.
know like 10 B players. So it's like finding that
And
right
there's
people.
ownership. And there's
Yeah.
ownership. There's
Hmm.
ownership. I mean, I'm in this phase now where things are going at a really nice pace. I no longer wake up in the middle of the night worried about payroll.
Hmm.
I don't worry about people being managed properly or doing their jobs because they have ownership over it, right? If it works well, then
Right.
they benefit. And if it doesn't, then they don't. Nobody's leaving anywhere because nobody in the world will pay them what we're paying them. And as a result, I don't worry, I don't stress, which like as a business owner, man, is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. Well, at the same time, I put a refocus on book writing, on authorship.
Right.
And what I have realized since doing that, I have this book coming out in January, and then the next book is already half done. It's due to come out
Yeah.
in spring of 2026. What I realized is that when I take on work that is purposeful, when I take on work that is the right kind of work for me, it makes me a better boss, a better father, son, husband. It makes me just better in every way
Hmm.
because the work actually is what I'm gaining from. Doing the work, challenging myself, doing this, in my case, writing the books, forces me to think about how I'm going about my day,
Mm.
forces me to read and consume information that's going to help my books better. But actually, here's the secret: make me better.
Yeah.
The process of writing a book about how to be happier and more successful makes the author much happier and more successful.
Yeah.
Yo, that's the secret.
Yeah. It's
And
it's like
that's
yeah.
that's how you win.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's how you win.
It's like the best way to learn it is to teach it yourself. So like by
Mm-hmm.
writing the book itself, now you're absorbing the information like real life because you gotta practice what you preach and like you're kind of just experiencing yourself firsthand.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it's
It's a
just
beautiful thing.
yeah, it's like so inspiring to see the amount of output you put, like because you've published so many books and
Mhm.
you're working really ahead in the curve. And I'm curious, like looking back on your book journey,
Yeah.
it's like how would you say you've grown like from this upcoming book with Obvious Choice versus when you first started with like your first few books?
I mean, the first book that I wrote, it's called Ignite the Fire,
Yeah.
and it's a book for personal trainers to how to have a better personal training career. I wrote that book when I was 24 years old,
Oh, that's young. Yeah. Hmm.
which is very young to write a book about how to educate an industry, of course.
Hmm.
And what drove me to write that book was optimistic ignorance. I knew so little
Mm.
about why I shouldn't have done that book that I wrote the book. It pulled me forward. I knew so little about how many other people were saying the same things as me
Hmm.
that I was willing and confident enough to say the things. I didn't get stuck because this was 2009 and 2010 when I was writing the book. I didn't get stuck going down the rabbit hole of all of the best practices for writing and podcasts and stuff like that. I figured it out as I went,
Mm.
right? That book was written because as really as a self-development tool. It did not start as a book. I was personal training
Mm.
clients. I had a clipboard, and on the back of the clipboard, I had a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, I wrote down a bullet note every time I did something in the gym. Picked up a piece of garbage, have a crush on the secretary, saw another trainer,
Yeah.
that happened a lot, saw another trainer taught an exercise wrong to their client. Should I intervene? Right.
Mm.
And then I go home at the end of the night and I would think about all of the bullet points and I would
Hmm.
write notes on them. And I would think about how I might have been able to deal with this better. And I would sometimes call friends and say, how would you have dealt with this? And that turned into a giant document that about a
Mm.
year after that, I showed it to my mom and she said, this is really interesting. You might have a book here.
Yeah.
It needs a lot of work,
Uh-huh.
but you might have a book here. I never thought about it being a book, right? It was
Mm.
my way of studying, of improving in my craft. Okay, I might have a book here. I need an editor. I'm a 24-year-old personal trainer in a
Uh-huh.
small boutique gym in Toronto. I don't know anybody who's written a book, let alone any editors, but I know where books are. So I went to the bookstore and I looked at the best-selling fitness books and I wrote down the
Mhm.
names of the authors and then I found out as many of their emails as I could, which is not hard to do. And I cold emailed them and I asked them for introductions to their editors.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so on and so on and so on. What I realized at that point is that so long as I stay optimistically ignorant, I can always figure out the next step. It's like
Mm.
you're driving along this pitch dark highway and there's twists and turns, and you know that your destination is an hour away. You don't know where the twists and turns are, but you've got your high beams lighting up about 100 meters in front of you.
Hmm.
But each time you drive 100 meters in that light, the next 100 meters
Right.
gets light. And then the next 100 meters gets lit up, and so on and so on and so on, almost pulling you forward right to your final destination. That's optimistic ignorance. So that was the first book, right?
Hmm.
This book, the obvious choice, is traditionally published. Big
Hmm.
six-figure book deal, all that stuff, HarperCollins, all that stuff, right? What this has shown me, proven to me, is the impact of having a truly world-class team that are all aligned around the same incentive structure.
Mm.
My agent only gets paid based off of performance of the book, right?
Wow. Hmm.
HarperCollins has put out, like I said, six figure, like multiple, like
Yeah.
hundreds
Yeah.
of
Many.
thousands of
Many.
dollars
Yeah.
into this book, right?
Yeah.
All of the people that work for them, I expect, do get bonuses based off of the performance of the book.
Hmm.
Their goals are very much aligned with mine. Now, we might have minor disagreements along the way, but we all want the same thing. When I self published, you could absolutely hire people who are skilled, but you don't hire them with aligned incentives.
Right.
You hire this interior designer, whatever it is, you pay them $5,000, $10,000. They don't get paid if that book does well, right? They're gone. They got their money.
Hmm.
Not to mention having to project manage them and all that stuff. And so, what has come out of this as a result is a product that is so far and beyond higher quality than anything I've ever produced before, to the point where I'm actually kind of embarrassed by the books that I've put out previously
Okay.
in light of this one.
Hmm.
I'm actually kind of embarrassed.
Uh, yeah, it's just profound to me, like to think that, when you have a team where all of our incentives are like aligned towards that one
Yeah,
mission, that one goal, extraordinary things can come out of it.
it
And
it's amazing.
yeah,
My God, it's amazing. And like really, truly world-class people who can all work within their unique abilities, their top 5%, their core competencies, use whatever
hmm,
jargon you want from the business world, but I'm able to focus on the writing of the book and the researching of the book and now the
right.
marketing of the book, right? Which is in my unique ability is the marketing bit. My agent is able to leverage the relationship she's built in her negotiation skills to be able to get the best deal, to be able to get the best buy-in and also the best partners for the project.
Mm,
The same thing with the developmental editor, the same thing with the copy editor, the same thing with the interior designer and the illustrator, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And all of us are able to work together to build this one project. You could maybe recreate that with self-publishing. I mean, you're talking about an entirely new business now,
yeah, it's
though.
gotta hire everyone, and then
And
yeah,
and and so you gotta find everyone, you gotta
mm,
vet them,
yeah,
you've got to manage them, assuming that everybody does the job when they're supposed to do the job,
hmm,
which is probably not going to happen with creatives.
yeah,
You've got to be taking in the stuff and organizing it. It's just no way. I mean, the team who worked on my book, including the marketing team and then the PR team that HarperCollins has hired to help me with it. I mean, you're talking about 15 plus people.
wow,
It is a single book is an entire business.
that's a lot of people working on one
When you want to
book.
do when you
Yeah,
want to do it well, when you want to
hmm,
do it well,
right.
right? And so you could absolutely self-publish a book. And I've done it many, many, many times.
Mm,
But there is no way that the quality is going to be in any way, shape, or form to the same. I mean, when I was debating between traditional and self-publishing, I called up a whole bunch of people that I trust. One of them is the editor in chief for Entrepreneur Mag,
mm,
and I asked him, what should I do, right? And his name's Jason. He's a good friend, and he's like, look, John, like I know you can write the hell out of a book. I know you can sell the hell out of a book. From my standpoint in the legacy media, though, what I'll tell you is this. Take it however you want to take it. He says, what I'll tell you is this. He says, if I get a self-published book that comes across my desk, I don't even look at it.
wow.
He goes, I have too much to do. I have too many books to review. And I don't know whether a self-published book is good or bad, but most self-published books, even if the ideas are good, are produced so poorly, are edited so poorly that I don't even look at them.
Mm.
Now, it's not to say that there aren't exceptions to the rule. Of course there
Yeah.
are.
Mhm.
You just got to catch up. You're starting, you're starting the race 300 meters behind.
Yeah.
You might be able to, you might be Usain Bolt. You might be David Goggins, you
Yeah.
know, you might be able to catch up, but you're starting at a big disadvantage when you don't have that team behind you.
Mm.
Um, that's all.
Yeah. I love your perspective on that. And you're saying how, you're really focused on the writing portion of that. And I'm curious to kind of dive deep into like what your process is, at least for this book, how you kind of
Yeah,
wrote everything down. Like, because I know you were saying how for Ignite the Fire, you just collected a list
right.
of everything, and obviously that probably isn't the case for this book. So I'm curious to hear
No.
how your process is for the obvious choice.
Well, number one, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Uh, the writing is everything. The product is everything.
Yeah.
The product is everything. Like, I don't care what thumbnails you use on social media. Like, Joe Rogan is still going to have more views on his YouTube videos than you, and he doesn't use thumbnails. So, like,
Yeah.
the product is everything.
Hmm.
The writing is everything. You might be able to fabricate a little bit of superficial success in the short term by hooking people, by
Hmm.
by tricking the algorithm, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, the product is everything. So long as you can get a critical mass of people to consume the product.
Hmm.
So I'm glad you pulled that out. The process for writing the book. So I mean, every book's a little bit different because Obvious Choice is more my business journey, right? The next book that I'm
Hmm.
putting out is actually the other half of it, which is my
Yeah.
personal journey.
Hmm. That's awesome.
And so how to find your way professionally, and the other one is how to find your way personally, right? And so it's literally like the a pair, the two books,
Hmm.
and it's the other half of the story. And so they're very different. But first of all, I try to just figure out what themes there are. So what are
Themes.
the main
Gotcha.
themes? What are the important things that I need to talk about here?
Hmm.
From a business journey, what do I think is very, very important? So I think it's very important to understand the differences, and I call it the passive income fallacy, like a lot of the traps that we fall into when it comes to cash and understanding money and understanding wealth and how wealth grows over time and how selling a $27 ebook or a low-end membership is almost always an absolutely god-awful, terrible business decision.
Mm.
But it tricks our dopamine sensors because we see more sales notifications in the short term. And so it deceives us into thinking that we're earning passive money, whereas it's a fallacy. So I
Mm.
thought that was very important. I think that it's very important to understand learning and skill acquisition. How do you decide what to learn when you're trying to grow in your industry, for example?
Hmm.
Well, every industry has a relatively low level of diminishing returns when it comes to industry specific knowledge. The majority of people who buy from you, whether it's a product or a service, really don't need a high level of expertise to achieve whatever they've set out to achieve by buying. And so when you understand that, which is a hard thing for people to understand because they're too close to their own world and surrounded by too many people like them.
Hmm.
But when you understand that, you start to say, okay, well, actually, if I want to have as much success as possible in my career, I need to actually understand, okay, I'm at that rate of diminishing returns in my own industry specific knowledge. I'm going to try to get better there, of course,
Mm.
but
For sure.
I'm going to surround myself with what I call leapfrog skills, right? I'm going to build a mediocre to low level skill set in wealth management, behavioral psychology, writing, presentation, communication skills. Because those are skills that you could match with any industry specific knowledge for
100%.
exponential growth.
Yeah.
But very few people do that. Very few people do that. You'll rise above your industry. So I start looking at all of these different themes, right? And so Obvious Choice is 15 of them, for example,
Love that.
like
Hmm.
that. Those are two examples, but it's 15 of
Yeah.
them. And I basically create on an Asana board. I use Asana. I don't care what you use, doesn't matter, but I use
Yeah.
Asana. And I create an Asana board for each. And then I'll start filling in stories and things like that. I'll basically just go into a deep research phase. A lot of it I already have. I've just been thinking about this over years. So I'll fill in stories. I'll talk to people. I will listen to podcasts. I'll read books. I'll be like, oh, there's a topic so I'll look at the best-selling books and I'll read those books.
Mhm.
And then I'll read the comments and the reviews of the books, particularly like 3-star reviews and stuff like that. And then whenever I have something interesting that I come about, what I'll do is I'll do a Google search. This is actually probably the best piece of research, the best single piece of research that I do
Mhm.
is you got to go deep in the net. I'll do a Google search on a topic, and I'll use a couple different keywords, but I'll do a Google search on a topic, and I'll look for and I'll try to find the best blog posts written on that subject. So I'll read the first 3 or 4 pages of Google, and I'll look for not the Business Insider shit, like usually personal blogs, like
Yeah.
the best blog post that I could find in it. And then I'll take that and I'll do a reverse search in Twitter and in Reddit for
Mhm.
anybody who's mentioned those blog posts. Because what I figured out is that Reddit and Twitter self-select people who were geekily obsessed about the stuff that they like.
Yeah. That is true. Yeah.
It's where the best people, the most obsessed people exist about their
Hmm.
topics. And so I've already gone out and I'll be like, all right, here's the best article that I could find on this. And I'll search for people who have mentioned that article on Twitter and Reddit. And what I'll do is I'll usually connect with them. But at the same time, I'll look at the tweet and stuff or the Reddit that they've mentioned, and then I'll look at the comments of those posts. Because very often the comments are also people who are geekily obsessed about that thing.
Hmm.
And they will very often link in other research studies, other articles hard to find, books hidden below the surface for no other reason than that book at that time just didn't hit. Or they'll just share wisdom like in that
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
And then I'll just continue that process going deeper and deeper and deeper. I'll read that study and then I'll look for people who have mentioned that study and go one step
Hmm.
deeper and so on and so on and so on. And that has given me such an amazing, unique insight. Like this article, I wanted to talk about how success is about doing good enough things repeatedly. Like it's not about being great, it's about doing good enough things repeatedly. And so there were a couple articles that I found that were great on it. And then I found a study from 30 years ago
Hmm.
by a guy named Chambliss about swimmers. That was one of the best sociological research papers I've ever read in my life.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
it was linked in the Twitter comments from somebody else who shared this original article. Somebody else came in and linked that in the Twitter comments. And I read that and I was like, this is incredible. And then I searched for that. And then I found another article that somebody wrote on the same subject
Yeah.
about body painters. The body painters bit didn't make it into the book. But you can just see
Yeah.
how this
Hmm.
happens, right? You
Hmm.
just find these incredible stories. And what does Morgan Housel say? Best story wins. I agree. Especially in business books, like how many times do you want to hear the same story about Buffett or Jobs or whatever? It's like I have 2 rules for telling a story in a book. Number one is a story that nobody's heard about from a source that nobody's heard about. That is just a beautiful story that's super sticky. Or the
Hmm.
second, which is actually better, is to find a story about somebody who everybody has heard about that has name recognition because that hooks you in,
Right.
but is either a unique angle that nobody's thought of or nobody's written about
Hmm.
yet, or it's a story about that person that isn't commonly told. Like there's this Jeff Bezos visited Y Combinator when he was trying to pitch people on Amazon Web Services on AWS.
Yeah.
And so he goes to Y Combinator and gives a talk at Y Combinator to try to convince people to use his hosting service.
Hmm.
Right? And in that talk, he shares a story of how he toured this 100-year-old Belgian beer maker. And what he learned there is that about 100 years ago in Belgium, all these beer makers, the electricity was basically invented, but there was no electrical grid. And so, in order for beer makers to become more efficient and
Mhm.
use electricity, they had to become experts in electricity production. And so some people did that, and those were the ones who didn't win, even though they became more efficient. And what Bezos said is generating your own electricity doesn't make your beer taste better.
Mhm.
Okay. That's probably a story you've never heard about from Bezos before.
Yeah, never heard of it. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
figuring out the best microphone to use on a podcast doesn't make your podcast better. Figuring out the best way to A/B test thumbnails on your TikToks doesn't make your TikToks better. You got to make your beer taste better.
Mhm.
And so what a great story, right? So that's what I'm looking for basically as I'm trying to do this.
Yeah, that's such a comprehensive system that you have going on here. I'm sure like you've kind of refined it over the years
100%.
as you publish more
100%.
and more books. And I want to talk a little bit more about like the concepts that you kind of introduce in the book, just as a little
Sure.
sneak peek. And one of them that you mentioned previously is like how on pricing that you don't pricing low is like one of the worst ways to help people. And you
Yeah.
also wrote that in like one of your Twitter threads. And I thought that was a really genius, idea because
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you also read Alex Hormozi's $100 million offers, but he was saying how I'm just gonna quote him here. The goal isn't just to be slightly above the market price. The goal is to be so much higher than a consumer thinks to themselves. This is so
Yep.
much more expensive. There must be something entirely different going on here.
Um,
And
I
I'm
would, I
curious.
would, I would, I would question that quote. I think that there's a lot of bullshit in that quote, but I
Uh-huh.
do agree. There is Hormozi is a fantastic salesperson.
Yeah.
He's a phenomenal communicator. But in doing that, of course, and the amount of content that he puts out, you kind of have to jump to conclusions a lot of the time where there might not be that clear a
Yeah.
conclusion.
Hmm.
So I would challenge him very much on that, on the conclusion that he came to that quote. But what I will say is, um, there is a massive advantage to being free. There is a massive
Hmm.
advantage to being very expensive. There's basically no competitive advantage anywhere in the middle.
Hmm.
A customer a customer doesn't judge you based off of whether or not you're expensive or free. They judge you based off of whether their problem was solved.
Hmm.
It's as simple as that. Did you solve their problem? And so particularly when you're new in business, right? You don't have the resources to be both very good and service a lot of people.
Hmm.
You just don't have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
So you can't do it at scale. So you've got to basically choose, right? Are you able to be free and use the advantages of being free to be able to build as much market saturation in a
Hmm.
niche, right? You want to monopolize a smallest available market. Talk about that in the book,
Yeah.
but to get as much market saturation as you can to be able to enable you to then build up, right? And build that great product. Or do you want to figure out a way to service as few people as possible for as much money as possible to have a lot of profit so that you can outserve people?
Hmm.
And so that's why the cover is whales and minnows, right? Free or expensive.
Yeah.
It's my life philosophy too. Show up or don't.
Hmm.
Just don't be half in. Either's fine. But if you're going to
Yeah.
show up or don't show up, right? Free or expensive. A lot of people think that low prices are the way to help the most amount of people. I think they're completely wrong. Um, the way to so a thought experiment is, if you really care about dental hygiene in the developing world, let's say, and you believe that the solution is to donate as many toothbrushes as possible to people
Hmm.
in the developing world, the best way to do that is not to start a low cost toothbrush company. The best way to do that is to start whatever company makes the most amount of profit as possible to be able to buy as many toothbrushes as possible to be able to donate as many toothbrushes.
Mm.
It does
Okay.
not matter if it's the same, even industry.
Hmm.
And so we're seeing this. I mean, my businesses are like that, right? I don't sell to a lot of people.
Hmm.
I have a mentorship that's very, very high cost, super high delivery, super high success rate. And then I have a ton of free material. And then, books, but I consider books to be free because there's no expectation of service. Somebody
Hmm.
buys a book, they don't expect you to be coached on it, right?
Yeah.
And so I consider that to be in the same bucket as free. And then I created a software platform called Quick Coach. Quick Coach is free.
Mhm.
I viewed my software platform as a lead generator and as a service to my industry.
Yeah.
How do you think we got 40,000 users in the first year and a half with $0 in marketing spend and not a single marketing person on staff? And
Right.
then now
Yeah.
we have a paid tier
Hmm. Yeah.
because once we did that, okay, the concept's proven. We have tons of users who are already using this.
Hmm.
We know that there's a stickiness to this type of product. It makes sense to go and build a feature set now that's worth paying for.
Yeah.
And we did that, and now we have two tiers,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. What I've noticed, like with a lot of like successful like entrepreneurs, is like they put out so much free value. Maybe that's through
Yeah.
like books and podcasts, newsletters, all that type of stuff. And then they have this like really core offer that's like really
Yep.
expensive, really high bar that they really only like go for like the selective few. So I think
Which is
what,
because it's
yeah,
extraordinarily expensive to do that. I mean,
yeah,
it's funny now because but he's like, oh, you got to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on content on free stuff. It's like I was spending $1 million plus on free content
wow,
from 2015 to 2020.
hmm,
Blog posts, right? But
yeah,
I was spending over $1 million a year on free articles and free content
hmm,
for those years. So yeah, man, I could tell you about all how that works. I was doing this before it was cool. But what you do need is you need a business, it doesn't really work with like a software business, for example, like a SaaS
hmm,
business. What you need is a business that kicks off a lot of cash up front. And that's why coaching
hmm,
businesses are so popular
right,
amongst thought leaders,
yeah,
is because coaching businesses are can be run very profitably. The good ones are. A lot of people don't really know how to run coaching business as well, but at scale, they can be run really, really profitably.
hmm,
We operate ours at about a 65% profitability. And they're cash heavy up front, but with very little upfront investment. And so they're a fantastic
hmm,
business to then pair with growing a platform, for example.
yeah,
That's going to then allow you to perhaps, if you want to, get into books, software, whatever, supplements, skin creams, hair extensions. I don't know, whatever you're into.
yeah. I think another thing you also mentioned, I think in your Twitter, that's like the market isn't saturated, you just don't stand out. I'm curious to hear,
Yeah.
you elaborate more on this. Like, what do you mean by this? Yeah.
I mean, okay. Over 90% of all sales that happen today are still sold based off of mostly offline word of mouth.
Mm.
Think about the last 10 things that you bought. Doesn't matter what they are. Could be anything, that water bottle,
Yeah.
right? Why did you buy it? Work backwards. How did you hear about it? Was it because somebody told you the top three things you need to know about buying a reusable water bottle on TikTok?
Definitely not.
Hell to the no.
Yeah.
To the no, no, no. That's not how we buy things.
Yeah. It's through word of mouth, right? Yeah.
Walk up and down the street at the businesses. Think about the services, your financial advisor. Think about the accountant. Think about the services that you use. Think about all of these things that you buy. How did you come across them? It is almost never content. It's almost
Yeah.
never content.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that content is bad, but I look at content as a nurturance. I look at content as a lead converter, not a lead generator.
Mm.
And so over time, I've got a four-stage content progression, right, that I teach in the book. I think
Hmm.
it's in chapter 14. And so if you decide to get into stage 4 and want to be a thought leader, yeah, things change, right? That's the Hermoses. That's where I'm in. Right? I'm 20 years into my career. I've already made tens of millions of dollars. Like
Yeah, yeah.
what people I think these days where they're going wrong is that um they think that in order to do dope shit in the real world, they have to first do dope shit online.
Hmm.
Whereas it's actually the opposite. You have to first do dope shit online and then you perhaps amplify it by talking about it in a dope way. Oh, sorry. You have to first do dope shit in the real world.
Yeah.
Then you perhaps amplify it by talking about it in a dope way online.
Mm,
But you don't actually ever need to, but you might choose to. You
yeah.
might choose to, right?
Hmm.
Which is fine, but you don't actually need to. And so most of sales are actually built based off of trust. It's as simple as that. Trust is a triangle: familiarity, affinity, and community.
Mm,
The more often we see things or hear about things, any kind of a connection that we feel towards a person, and any kind of shared community. I hired my financial advisor because he sat on the board of the synagogue that I used to go to. I have not attended that synagogue for 20 years.
mm,
I didn't interview any other financial advisor. I never looked up anything about how to choose a financial advisor. I have no idea what qualifications a financial advisor should have.
yeah.
Um, and this is how we buy things. This is how
Right.
we all buy things. And so it's the 1% that makes you different, not the 99% that makes you the same as other people in your industry that you actually need to lean into. I call it the 1% uniqueness factor.
Mm,
And when you lean into that, you actually work backwards from that weirdness and infuse that into what you do. Maybe not weirdness, right? Just your
hmm.
path. Are you faith
Yeah.
based, for example?
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and there's a whole bunch of frameworks and systems to do that, but really, it's the 1% that makes you unique. It's how do we trust people these days when there's so much information out there that we can't possibly reasonably think that we are not going to be comically ignorant towards the reasons why somebody should buy just about anything.
Mm,
Like, I optimize in fitness. I know why somebody should logically hire a fitness coach.
hmm.
I understand that the vast majority of people who hire fitness coaches have zero ability to properly gauge what makes a good fitness coach or not. You can bitch and moan about how stupid that is, or you can understand the rules of the game and decide how you can play in within them.
Mm,
It's the same way for any industry. You're too close to your own thing. You know all the logical reasons why it's good or it's not good. The people buying from you, however, don't.
right.
And you shouldn't expect them to. Oh, the customer doesn't get it. Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't expect them to.
Mm. Well, so many like jumping off points, but I mean, our time is almost up. But I think, yeah, I think one question I want to close off with,
Mm,
maybe kind of related to finding that 1% of uniqueness is, what would you say to like an 18, 19, 20-year-old who's like highly ambitious and wants to do great things in the world, maybe start their own business or like maybe write a book, just doing cool
yeah.
things out there. What would you say to them? And maybe that can tie into that 1% uniqueness factor.
Something that I reflect on a lot about my days in high school and university
Yeah.
is I always found that I was comparing myself to other people who were there, and I always wanted to be the cool kid. I was never the cool kid, but I always wanted to be the cool kid. Or there were always people who were more popular, better athletes, people even who made money in high school and university, right? When I wasn't. I was working at the gym, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like entrepreneurial wise. And uh and what I've realized since then is that when you're in high school and to a lesser extent, but still when you're in university, you're forced to exist within a place with other people who all compare themselves to one another, right? Neighbors
Hmm.
compare themselves to one another, colleagues do, students
Yeah.
do,
100%.
etc. And when you're forced to exist within that place with those other people, you compare yourself with them and you inevitably fall into the trap of trying to climb that social ladder.
Mm.
It's complete bullshit. The minute that you exit it, you'll realize how much bullshit
Yeah,
is contained within it. Now, adults also fall into these traps, of course,
for sure.
but them falling into this trap is by their own device, not one that
Mhm.
they're forced within, like we are all going to the same school. And so when I asked a question like this, what I do is I give advice based off of what I wish that I did in university, which
Yeah.
was pay way less attention to the school and pay way more attention to the clubs, pay way more attention to the intramurals, pay way more attention to going to my professor's office hours and just asking them questions about life unrelated to their
Mhm.
courses and following threads and beginning to be the center of attention. So follow those threads. Follow
Mhm.
those threads. And when you find something that you find that is for whatever reason comes natural to you or you're just interested in 18th century literature, I don't give a shit. Put up signs around campus and say, I'm getting together at this place and we're all going to be reading in silent for 30 minutes. And then we're going to talk about what we read with one another and just invite other people
Mhm.
who are weird like you in that way into your world.
Yeah.
College is a wonderful place for that. I wish I did more
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
And that's how you find your people, you know?
Yeah. That's true.
That's how you find your people.
Yeah. Love that. And where can people get updated with your upcoming book launch? Where can you kind of direct people to look at?
So here's what I'll say. The book is
Yeah.
called The Obvious Choice. You can get it on Audible, on Kindle, on hardcover. It's just hardcover. Hardcover's always better, but whatever
Mhm.
you like. And God, I'm so confident in this book. It's so good.
It'd be
God,
amazing.
it's good.
Yeah.
God, it's good. I put my heart and soul into this thing for 3 years.
Mhm.
So here's the deal that I'll make with you listening. Buy the book. Don't even think about it. Buy the book. And if you don't absolutely love it, like not just okay, if you don't absolutely love it, send me a message on either Instagram or Twitter. I'm at It's Coach Goodman, and I will send you back 100% of the money that you spent on the book out of my own pocket. Hope that you check it out.
Great way to end the podcast. Thanks for being on, Jonathan. It's been
You
a
got
really
it.
good conversation, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.